Ever stop and think about what actually runs through a narcissist's mind when you suddenly vanish? It's never what they want you to believe. Behind their calm face, their distant tone, or their cold silence, there's chaos, panic, and fixation twisting underneath. They may pretend they're unbothered, but internally a storm is tearing through them. Today, I'm revealing 10 unfiltered truths about what they feel the moment you decide to disappear. If any part of this echoes your own experience, take a breath and acknowledge something important. Your absence isn't emptiness, it's clarity. Boundaries don't just safeguard you, they reveal who they really are. Share this with someone who needs to understand why stepping away can become a narcissist's greatest emotional disruption. When you walk away from a narcissist without warning, the very first thing they feel is a sharp and immediate loss of control. Control is the core of their emotional existence. It props up their illusion of superiority, their belief that they shape situations, and their conviction that they can direct people according to their needs. When you disappear, that structure collapses, often in a way that feels frightening to them. They're used to having access to your reactions, your attention, and your energy. Even small signs like delayed replies or slight resistance usually trigger their anxiety. But total absence is a shock that rattles their entire system. They rely on knowing, predicting, and steering the emotional exchanges around them. Your disappearance creates a gap they can't instantly fill, leaving them confused and unsettled. This loss of control cuts deeper than it appears. It attacks the foundation of their self-image. They often connect their identity to their ability to influence others. When that influence vanishes overnight, it sparks inner turmoil. You might notice attempts to reestablish dominance, whether through direct messages, indirect contact, or subtle manipulation via other people, all designed to regain leverage. Inside their mind, thoughts race. They reanalyze moments, wondering what triggered your withdrawal, what you may be planning, and how they can pull you back under their psychological reach. This reaction intensifies because narcissists cannot tolerate uncertainty. They prefer environments they can dictate. When you disappear, they're thrown into unpredictability, and unpredictability creates panic. Even if they appear composed, their inner world is filled with frustration, doubt, and intrusive thoughts about you. Your silence becomes powerful because it strips away the illusion of control they depend on, forcing them to face a reality where they're no longer the architect of your emotions or attention. It's in this unfilled space that the narcissist feels their first wave of destabilization the moment you step out of their reach. When you disappear, the narcissist's insecurity doesn't just rise, it explodes. Beneath the polished surface, their confidence is far more fragile than you ever saw. Your silence becomes a direct threat to the identity they work relentlessly to maintain. Narcissists cling to external validation to keep their inner world steady. Your energy, reactions, praise, arguments, everything feeds their self-worth. When that supply stops abruptly, it creates a silence they aren't emotionally built to tolerate. That silence becomes a mirror reflecting their deepest fear, that they aren't enough, that they could be replaced, that someone else might hold the emotional influence they thought they controlled. Their insecurity grows because your disappearance breaks the predictable rhythm they relied on. They may have assumed you would always be available no matter how they treated you. When you suddenly stop responding, stop giving emotional cues, stop explaining yourself, they begin to spiral inside. They wonder if you've moved on, if you finally saw through them, or if they've completely lost their grip on someone they assumed would stay. This leads to quiet but frantic self-comparison. They start imagining competitors, imagining your new life, fearing they've lost the position they believed was guaranteed. Their ego can't tolerate the idea of being overlooked. So insecurity morphs into a desperate hunger for reassurance. Even if they stay silent, internally they're flooded with self-doubt. They may question their attractiveness, their importance, or their emotional power over you. Because they can't regulate themselves emotionally, they twist these feelings into stories that protect their ego. They might convince themselves that you're the unstable one, that you're confused, that you'll eventually come back. All of this shields them from the rising panic that they've lost something they never expected to lose: your attention. Your disappearance becomes a test they never prepared for, exposing the weakness behind the confidence they try so hard to project. When you disappear, the narcissist slips into confusion and obsessive overthinking, a mental interrogation they can't escape. They rely on reading people, controlling reactions, and maintaining psychological advantage. Your silence destroys the system they depend on. Without your reactions, they lose the emotional data they use to steer the dynamic. This sudden uncertainty triggers an intense need to analyze everything, but instead of clarity, they fall into a loop. They revisit old conversations, small shifts in your mood, moments you challenged them, or moments you supported them. Every memory becomes a puzzle piece they try forcing into a narrative that restores their sense of control. But narcissists don't handle ambiguity. They want absolute answers, predictable patterns, and outcomes they can manipulate. When you disappear without closure, their mind spirals with questions they'll never admit. Did you stop caring? Did you uncover something? Did someone else replace them? Are you testing them? Their mind becomes a maze of what ifs. Because they can't accept vulnerability, they imagine scenarios where they still hold the upper hand. They picture you chasing them, missing them, regretting leaving, yet privately fear none of that is real. This obsession isn't love, it's the threat of losing emotional dominance. They become unsettled by the idea that they can't predict your next move. Every unanswered question becomes a bruise on their ego. Your silence contradicts their expectation that people orbit around them. Instead of acknowledging the behaviors that pushed you away, they dramatize or rationalize the situation to protect their identity. The more they try to understand it, the more fixated they become. Confusion feeds obsession. Obsession feeds the need for answers, trapping them in a mental loop created entirely by your silence. When you disappear, another immediate emotion rising in the narcissist is frustration that quickly shifts into anger. But this isn't the anger of a normal conflict. It's a deeper, primal rage born from powerlessness. Their relationships revolve around dominance and emotional control. Your absence strips all of that. They're not just irritated you left. They're furious they can't reach you, influence you, or drag you back into their orbit. Every failed attempt to reconnect feels like an attack on their imagined authority. The frustration starts as irritation that things aren't going according to their internal script. Narcissists expect emotional predictability, expecting you to respond or react. When you don't, the silence feels humiliating. That humiliation quickly turns into anger because anger protects them from feeling weak. They tell themselves you're ungrateful or dramatic. This story helps them feel superior again. Inside, they may replay situations where they felt slighted, exaggerating them to justify their rage. They frame your disappearance as an insult, betrayal, or challenge. This lets them see themselves as the victim rather than acknowledging their actions. Without access to you, they can't release their anger through manipulation, confrontation, or guilt. With no outlet, the anger simmers. Even if they act unaffected, it shows up in snapping at others, irritability, or petty behavior. Your disappearance destabilizes them, and that destabilization erupts as anger because it's the only emotion they can express without confronting vulnerability. When you disappear, one of the most unsettling emotions they feel is the fear of being exposed. This fear isn't always visible. Often it lives quietly beneath the surface, in a place they don't want anyone to see. Narcissists depend on controlling the narrative, shaping how they're perceived and how the relationship is remembered. When you step away, that narrative becomes fragile. They know distance gives you clarity. Clarity helps you see the signs they hoped you'd miss. This threatens the identity they spend so much effort crafting. Your absence creates quiet moments they can't manage because stillness invites truth. They fear you finally recognize the manipulation or the patterns they hid behind charm. They also worry you might share your clarity with others, harming the reputation they desperately protect. Their fear shows up as anxiety disguised as irritation. They watch your posts, your words, your interactions, searching for clues that you're still influenced by their storyline. If they sense you're gaining strength, the fear intensifies. They imagine you exposing them or moving on with a confidence that makes them look insignificant. This fear isn't just about reputation, it's about their fragile ego. They can't tolerate the thought that someone saw behind the mask. Your disappearance threatens them because distance gives you perspective, and perspective can unravel the persona they hide behind. When you disappear, the narcissist enters a chaotic emotional swing between idealizing you and devaluing you. This rapid switching isn't about you, it's about their unstable self-esteem trying to regulate itself without your presence. They project onto others constantly, lifting them up when useful, tearing them down when threatened. When you vanish, they lose the emotional anchor they used to project onto. One moment, they recall your kindness or support, idealizing you because losing someone they valued threatens their ego. But idealization requires vulnerability, so they quickly flip into devaluation. They tell themselves you were dramatic, replaceable, or not as important. This protects their pride. But devaluation doesn't last because your absence creates a void. Without you, they lose admiration and emotional stimulation. So they drift back into idealization, reminiscing about moments you made them feel powerful or adored. This back and forth intensifies because they can't regulate themselves. When you're present, they stabilize by reacting to you. When you're gone, they're stuck with their own conflicting thoughts. They may fantasize about pulling you back, then moments later insist they're better without you. Neither state comforts them. They idealize you to soothe loss and devalue you to protect ego. Your disappearance forces them to face this instability alone. And without control, the internal chaos grows louder and harder to escape. When you disappear, the narcissist feels a powerful craving for validation that grows stronger with every hour of your silence. This isn't the longing of someone who misses a genuine connection. For them, validation is emotional fuel. Your attention confirmed their worth, appeal, and influence. Whether through affection or arguments, your reactions fed their ego. When you vanish, that supply cuts off instantly. They begin to feel emotionally starved. They wonder why you aren't reaching out, why you're not reacting, why you're not trying to fix things. Even your silence becomes something they want to provoke a reaction from. They may check your profiles, reread old messages, or imagine scenarios where you're thinking about them. They don't necessarily want you. They want the validation you provided. Without it, their self-esteem starts cracking. They lack internal stability and rely on others to reflect a version of themselves they can believe in. Your disappearance removes that reflection, leaving them with emptiness. They might think of reaching out, crafting messages to guilt you or pull you back emotionally, or posting things meant to spark jealousy. Every action revolves around restoring the validation they lost. Even if they pretend not to care, the craving continues. They may seek attention from others, but it never feels the same because it doesn't come from you. Your silence denies them the reassurance they desperately seek, and the lack of validation becomes a wound their ego struggles to heal. When you disappear, the narcissist often shifts into strategic planning. This isn't a heartfelt attempt to reconnect. It's a calculated psychological move to pull you back into their sphere of influence. Your absence creates a void in their control, and they feel compelled to fill it. They begin evaluating what worked on you in the past. If charm once softened you, they consider returning with affection. If guilt once drew you in, they craft messages designed to trigger responsibility or sympathy. If drama once captured your attention, they imagine ways to manufacture a sense of urgency. Their strategy changes depending on how threatened they feel. Sometimes they plan a gentle re-entry, like liking a post or sending a casual message. Other times they imagine dramatic gestures or emotional confessions. Every approach is centered on one goal: reestablishing emotional dominance. Even if they don't act immediately, the planning starts early because silence creates anxiety and strategizing gives temporary relief. They rehearse conversations, imagine your responses, and craft ways to counter anything that doesn't align with their desired outcome. This isn't self-reflection, it's preparation. They're not considering your feelings, only their ability to regain power. They think through excuses, blame shifting, or explanations meant to make them look justified. Even the timing of their message is intentional, waiting for a moment they think you might be emotionally vulnerable. In their mind, your disappearance isn't closure, it's a challenge, a power imbalance they're determined to correct by any psychological means they believe will work.